The neural interface crackled with incoming data streams as Executive Director Calith Rin watched the holographic display rotate before him. Numbers cascaded down transparent screens: profit margins, resource extraction rates, planetary exploitation indices, all perfectly optimized, all perfectly soulless. The Terran colonies continued to exceed productivity benchmarks. His AI assistant, Nexus-7, reported through the implant behind his left ear. However, Sector 47B shows concerning anomalies. Calith's augmented eyes focused on the problematic data cluster. A small mining world designated Terranova 7 had been flagging unusual readings for 3 standard cycles. Not financial irregularities, those he could handle with surgical precision. These were human behavioral patterns that defied corporate logic. "Deploy a field assessment team," he commanded, his voice echoing in the sterile executive chamber, high above New Geneva's sprawling metroplex. "I want to know why productivity hasn't declined, despite implementing Protocol Sigma." Protocol Sigma was his masterpiece, a psychological conditioning system that optimized worker output by removing emotional variables, hope, joy, personal connections, all inefficiencies that reduced quarterly returns. It had been successfully deployed across 47 colony worlds, turning entire populations into perfect, productive automatons. But not Terranova 7. The transport ship corporate verdict cut through hyperspace like a blade through silk. Calith stood in the observation deck, watching stars stretch into lines of light. His reflection stared back, angular features enhanced by genetic modification, eyes replaced with chrome-silver optical implants, skin bearing the subcutaneous circuitry patterns that marked him as a board-level executive. He had been human once, before the Prometheus Corporation claimed him at age 16. Before they stripped away everything unnecessary and rebuilt him as the perfect instrument of profit. Emotions were luxuries he couldn't afford. Compassion was a market inefficiency. Love was a resource drain. The ship dropped out of hyperspace, and Terranova 7 filled the viewport. It should have been a gray, industrial hellscape, like every other mining world. Instead, bioluminescent gardens spiraled around the extraction. Towers, art installations crafted from recycled mining equipment, dotted the landscape. The settlements pulsed with warm golden light instead of the harsh white illumination of standard corporate infrastructure. "Impossible," Calith muttered, his enhanced vision analyzing the spectral data. The energy expenditure alone should have bankrupted their resource allocation. He materialized on the planet's surface through quantum teleportation, his black executive suit a stark contrast to the vibrant world around him. The air itself seemed different, charged with something his instruments couldn't quantify. That's when he saw her. She emerged from what should have been a sterile processing facility, but the building bloomed with climbing plants and prismatic light sculptures. Her skin bore the distinctive blue-silver patterns of a Kepler-born human, but it was her eyes that stopped his enhanced heart. They held something he'd forgotten existed, genuine warmth. Not the calculated friendliness of corporate training, but real human connection. "You must be the Prometheus evaluator," she said, her voice carrying musical undertones that made his neural implants fluctuate. "I'm Director Nixara Salone. Welcome to our little experiment in profitable happiness." Calith's training demanded. He correct her. He was an executive director, not a mere evaluator. But the words died in his throat as she smiled, and for the first time in 20 years, his perfect corporate composure cracked. Nixara led him through impossible corridors where efficiency and beauty coexisted in ways that violated every principle of corporate architecture. Miners worked alongside holographic gardens, their faces bearing expressions Calith had almost forgotten existed. Contentment, even joy. The productivity metrics his implants fed him were staggering. They weren't just meeting quotas, they were exceeding them by margins that should have been impossible. "Your reports indicated Protocol Sigma implementation 3 cycles ago," Calith said, his voice carrying the cold authority of corporate judgment. Yet these workers display clear signs of emotional contamination. Nixara paused beside a massive excavation chamber where workers sang in harmonious patterns while their quantum drills carved through asteroid rock. Protocol Sigma was implemented exactly as specified. What the board didn't anticipate was that happiness could be engineered as precisely as despair. She gestured to a group of miners who had formed a spontaneous orchestra during their rest period, playing instruments crafted from discarded mining equipment. Their music resonated through the chamber, somehow synchronizing with the drilling rhythms to create an otherworldly symphony. You see dysfunction, I see optimization. Her eyes met his, and Calith felt his neural barriers struggling against something indefinable. When people have hope, they work harder. When they have beauty, they create more efficiently. When they love what they do, they transcend mere productivity. Calith's enhanced cognition processed the data, seeking flaws in her logic. The Prometheus board calculated that emotional variables reduce efficiency by 23.7%. Your methods are ... unprecedented. Your board calculated based on suppression methodologies, Nixora replied, leading him to an observation platform overlooking the main mining complex. I chose enhancement instead. Protocol Sigma aimed to remove human variables. I amplified them. Below them, the mining operation flowed like a living organism. Workers moved in synchronized patterns that seemed choreographed, yet organic. Children played in educational gardens, built around geological laboratories. Artists worked alongside engineers, their creations somehow improving both morale and structural integrity. The psychological profiles indicate dangerous levels of individual identity retention, Calith warned, though his voice lacked its usual certainty. The board specifically requires personality standardization for optimal management. Nixora's laugh was like crystalline chimes in a solar wind. Personality standardization. You mean the systematic murder of human souls? I've read your files. Calith Rin. You were exceptional before they rebuilt you into their perfect corporate weapon. His real name. She had spoken his real name, not his executive designation. Something deep in his neural architecture shuddered, dormant pathways flickering, with forgotten electricity. I am Executive Director, KR7739, he replied automatically, but the words felt hollow. You are Calith Rin, born on Earth's Luna colony, son of Maria and David Rin, who loved stories and painted watercolor nebulae until the Prometheus scouts found you. Her voice carried impossible knowledge, dangerous knowledge. You dreamed of being an explorer, not an executioner. The memories crashed against his enhanced consciousness like waves against a breaking dam. His parents' faces, blurred but warm. The weight of a paintbrush in child hands. The taste of real sunlight on Luna's observation domes. Everything the corporation had deemed inefficient and purged from his neural pathways. Those memories are archived, he said, his voice fracturing. Psychological inefficiencies resolved through therapeutic modification, not resolved, buried. Nixara stepped closer, and her presence seemed to radiate something that made his cybernetic enhancements falter. I've been studying Prometheus modification protocols for years. The memories aren't deleted, they're compressed and locked behind neural barriers. They can be recovered. Calith's hand moved involuntarily to the interface port behind his ear, where Nexus 7 fed him constant streams of corporate directives. For a moment, the flow of data seemed less like information and more like chains. Why? The question escaped before his executive conditioning could suppress it. Why risk corporate retaliation for a mining colony's emotional stability? Nixura's expression grew serious, and for the first time, he glimpsed the steel beneath her warmth. Because 17 years ago, Prometheus destroyed my homeworld, using the same protocols they used on you. They took everything I loved and turned it into profit margins. But they made one mistake. They let me live. The revelation hit Calith like a quantum disruptor to his enhanced nervous system. Kepler Beta 4, the mining disaster that had made him executive director, the colony that had been deemed economically unviable after widespread psychological resistance to corporate optimization protocols. Impossible. His augmented memory accessed the classified files automatically. Kepler Beta 4 was destroyed by tectonic instability, seismic cascades caused by overmining. No survivors. Nixara's bioluminescent skin patterns pulsed with barely contained fury. Overmining caused by your predecessor's implementation of Protocol Alpha. When the colonists began showing signs of hope and cooperation, despite the conditioning, the board decided the entire colony was contaminated. They triggered the seismic charges manually, the cold corporate calculation that had earned Calith his promotion. 300,000 casualties written off as acceptable losses in pursuit of operational efficiency. He had reviewed the files personally, approved the insurance claims, even recommended the senior staff for commendations. I was 18, Nixara continued, her voice carrying the weight of stellar distances, apprenticed to the colony's chief mining engineer. When the charges detonated, I was in the deep survey tunnels. The compression wave threw me into a quantum fissure. By the time I clawed my way back to the surface, everyone I'd ever loved was dead. Calith's enhanced memory began cross-referencing, his corporate training demanding verification of her claims. But something deeper was stirring those buried neural pathways she had mentioned, responding to her pain with an empathy his modifications couldn't quite suppress. You survived through quantum displacement, he found himself saying, and the words came from somewhere beyond his programming. The temporal distortion would have taken years to stabilize. You've been planning this for 17 years, she confirmed, learning everything I could about Prometheus protocols, about the executives who implement them, about you. She led him to her private quarters, a space that defied every principle of corporate efficiency. Living walls breathed with bioluminescent organisms. Holographic displays showed not profit margins but star charts, musical compositions, and what appeared to be detailed psychological profiles. His own face stared back from a dozen screens' childhood. Photos the corporation had supposedly destroyed, academic records from before his recruitment, even crude paintings he'd made as a boy. All the humanity they had stripped away, meticulously reconstructed. How? The question was barely a whisper. The same way I reverse-engineered Protocol Sigma, the same way I've been freeing modified humans across 17 star systems, the same way I'm going to offer you a choice they never gave you. She activated a device that looked like a neural interface, but organic, grown rather than manufactured. I can unlock what they buried in your mind, all of it, but the process, will destroy my corporate functionality, Calith finished. His training screamed warnings about psychological contamination, about the dangers of unregulated emotional processing. I would become inefficient. You would become human again. The implications cascaded through his enhanced cognition. Without his corporate modifications, he would lose his executive privileges, his augmented abilities, his carefully constructed identity. He would become vulnerable to the same crushing emotional weight that had destroyed Kepler Beta 4. But he would also become Calith Rin again. The board will classify me as compromised, he said, his voice mechanical with trained responses. Termination protocols will activate. I'll be hunted across the galaxy. Yes, Nixara agreed. But you'll be free. She stood before him, this impossible woman who had survived genocide and turned it into hope, who had faced the crushing weight of the Prometheus Corporation and transformed it into something beautiful. Her presence was already changing him, awakening neural pathways that had been dormant for 20 years. And if I refuse, he asked, though he already knew the answer, then you complete your evaluation. Report Terranovi 7 as a successful Protocol Sigma implementation and return to your sterile existence. The board never needs to know about the modifications I've made. But the 27 other colonies I've been working with will have to be relocated before they can be discovered. 27 colonies. Hundreds of thousands of people who had found hope in corporate hell, who had built beauty from brutal efficiency. All of them would face the same fate as Kepler Beta 4 if he maintained his corporate loyalties. Calith looked at his reflection in the organic neural interface, seeing both the chrome-eyed executive and the ghost of the boy who had painted nebulae. For the first time in 20 years, he had a choice that wasn't predetermined by corporate algorithms. If I do this, he said slowly, if I let you unlock what they buried, ... What happens to Terra Nova 7? To you? Nixara's smile was radiant as a binary sunrise. We keep building something worth living for, and maybe, together, we can light up the whole galaxy. The neural crown felt alive against Calith's skin, its bioorganic components interfacing with his consciousness in ways that made his corporate implants recoil in programmed horror. Nixira's hands guided the delicate mechanisms, her touch sending cascades of unfamiliar sensation through his modified nervous system. The process will be painful, she warned, her voice gentle but honest. 20 years of compressed memories, emotions, and experiences trying to reassert themselves simultaneously. Your enhanced cognition will fight every step of the awakening. Calith nodded, surprising himself with the decision. Do it. The first wave hit him like a solar storm. Memories flooded back in chaotic streams, his mother's voice singing old Earth lullabies, the smell of hydroponic gardens on Luna Colony, the weight of natural tears on his face. But alongside the memories came the pain of their loss, the grief that Protocol Delta had surgically removed from his psyche. He screamed, his enhanced vocal cords producing harmonics that shattered 3 data displays. His augmented muscles spasmed as foreign neurochemicals flooded systems designed for cold efficiency. The corporate conditioning fought back, activating emergency protocols designed to preserve his executive functionality. Hold on, Nixora whispered, her bioluminescent patterns synchronizing with the neural crown's rhythms. You're stronger than their programming. You always were. More memories surfaced the day Prometheus scouts had arrived at Luna Colony, promising advancement and opportunity. His parents' faces, worried but proud, as they signed the recruitment contracts. The first neural modifications, performed while he slept, changing his brain chemistry without his knowledge or consent. But there were other memories too, ones that made his corporate identity writhe in existential horror. The first time he had authorized a Protocol Sigma deployment, knowing it would destroy the emotional bonds that made a colony feel like home. The casual approval of resource optimization plans that resulted in thousands of deaths. The methodical destruction of his own humanity, one quarterly report at a time. I'm a monster, he gasped, his voice breaking with 20 years of suppressed emotion. The things I've done. Entire worlds, ... You're a victim who became a perpetrator, Nixara corrected, her hand steady on his shoulder as his consciousness rewrote itself. But victims can choose to become healers instead. The neural crown pulsed, and suddenly, he could feel her presence in ways his enhanced senses had never registered. Not just her physical form, but her emotional resonance, the vast network of connections she had built across the colony. Terra Nova 7 wasn't just a mining operation, it was a living community. Every individual linked by bonds of genuine care and mutual support. How? He asked, his awareness expanding beyond his individual consciousness. How did you build this? The same way you'll help me build 27 more, she replied. One person at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of connection at a time. His corporate implants were failing now, their programming overwhelmed by the tsunami of recovered humanity. NEXUS 7's voice became fragmented static, then faded entirely. The constant stream of productivity data, profit margins, and efficiency metrics fell silent for the first time in 2 decades. In the sudden quiet, he heard something impossible, his own heartbeat, unenhanced and natural, pumping blood through veins that remembered what it felt like to be alive. "The board will know," he said, his voice now carrying emotional undertones he'd forgotten he possessed. "The moment my neural link goes offline, they'll dispatch a termination squad. We have maybe 6 hours before an alarm klaxon cut through the air, followed by the unmistakable whine of military-grade transport engines." Through the living walls of Nixera's quarters, they could see the angular shapes of Prometheus enforcement, vessels descending from orbit like mechanical vultures. "They're early," Nixera observed with remarkable calm. "Someone must have been monitoring your neural patterns remotely. The changes would have triggered automatic alerts." Calith tried to access his executive override codes, but his modified consciousness no longer interfaced with corporate systems. He was fully human now, vulnerable and mortal, facing the vast machinery of the Prometheus Corporation with nothing but recovered memories and awakened emotions. "I've doomed us all," he whispered, the weight of responsibility crushing down on his newly liberated psyche. "Everyone on this colony, all the other colonies you've been helping, they'll all be classified as contaminated." Nixera's smile blazed with fierce determination. "Not if we give them something more valuable than destruction. Not if we show them that hope is more profitable than despair." She activated a hidden communication array, and suddenly the quarters filled with holographic projections, the faces of colonists from across the galaxy, all of them bearing the same expression of awakened humanity that now burned in Calith's eyes. "Are you ready?" she asked them all, her voice carrying across light years of space. "We've been ready for 17 years, came the unified response from 27 worlds. As the enforcement vessels touched down outside, Calith realized that Nixera's true weapon wasn't just the ability to restore individual humanity, was the network of connections she had built, a web of love and hope that spanned the galaxy. The Prometheus Corporation had made one fatal error in their calculations. They had assumed that human connection was a weakness to be exploited. They were about to learn it was a strength, beyond their comprehension. The enforcement squad breached the facility with mechanical precision, their black armor gleaming under Terra Nova 7's organic lighting. Calith recognized the unit designation Prometheus Elite Guard, enhanced soldiers who had undergone even more extensive modifications than corporate executives. They moved with inhuman coordination, their consciousness networked into a single tactical intelligence. Executive Director KR-7739, the squad leader announced, through external speakers, "You have been classified as psychologically compromised. Prepare for immediate extraction and reconditioning." But as they advanced through the facility's corridors, something unprecedented happened. The colonists didn't flee in terror, as Protocol Sigma had conditioned them to do. Instead, they formed protective circles around the enforcement squad, their linked consciousness creating barriers of pure emotional resonance. Calith watched in amazement as the elite soldiers faltered, their networked minds encountering something. Their programming had never prepared them for genuine human compassion directed at their enemies. The colonists sang in harmonious patterns, their voices carrying frequencies that resonated with the buried humanity in the soldiers' modified brains. "Impossible," the squad leader's voice showed the first signs of uncertainty. "Civilians cannot affect military-grade neural conditioning. Military-grade neural conditioning assumes its targets are individuals," Nixera replied, stepping forward with arms spread wide. "You're not fighting people. You're fighting a community. You're fighting love itself." One by one, the enforcement soldiers began removing their helmets, their faces showing the confusion of minds awakening from decades of programmed slavery. Calith could see the moment when their buried memories began to resurface, the same painful, beautiful process he had just experienced. "What are you doing to us?" one soldier whispered, his voice breaking with the weight of recovered emotion. "Nothing," Nixera answered. We're showing you what you've always been underneath the modifications. The question is, what do you choose to do with that knowledge? The holographic displays around them flickered to life, showing scenes from across the galaxy. On 27 worlds, similar confrontations were playing out. Corporate security. Forces arriving to find not cowering subjects, but communities united by bonds stronger than any neural conditioning. The network Nixera had built wasn't just psychological, it was quantum entangled, allowing instantaneous communication and emotional resonance across interstellar distances. It's spreading, Calith breathed, his awakened consciousness able to perceive the vast web of connections for the first time. Every person they restore influences others. Every act of compassion creates ripples through the corporate network. The enforcement squad's communications equipment crackled with incoming reports from across the galaxy. Prometheus facilities experiencing unprecedented psychological anomalies. Corporate executives requesting emergency reconditioning after exposure to emotional contamination. Entire star systems reporting sudden drops in productivity as workers began forming unauthorized social bonds. "This is Executive Board Emergency Protocol," a cold voice announced through the soldiers' communication systems. "All compromised personnel are to be terminated immediately. The contamination must not spread." The squad leader raised his weapon toward Nixera, but his hand trembled with the conflict between programming and awakened conscience. I can't. Orders are clear, but I can't. "Because your orders are wrong," Calith said, stepping between the soldier and Nixera. "Because somewhere deep in your modified mind, you remember what it feels like to care about another person. Because you're not a weapon, you're a human being who deserves to choose his own path." The weapon fell from nerveless fingers as the soldier collapsed to his knees, overwhelmed by the return of 2 decades worth of suppressed emotions. Around him, his squad mates were experiencing similar breakdowns, their military conditioning crumbling in the face of unconditional acceptance. "Sir," the communications officer reported, his voice strange with wonder. "We're receiving similar reports from enforcement units across 17 sectors. The contamination appears to be spreading through direct contact with affected personnel." Nixera smiled, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with triumph. "Not contamination, liberation. Every person who remembers how to feel becomes a beacon for others." The network grows stronger with each awakening. Through the facility's organic walls, they could see more Prometheus vessels arriving in orbit, not enforcement ships this time, but capital-class destroyers preparing for planetary bombardment. The board had made their decision. If they couldn't contain the spread of human consciousness, they would sterilize it entirely. "They're going to destroy the planet," Calith said, his awakened empathy making the implications crushing. "Everyone here, everyone we've saved. It's all going to be for nothing." "No," Nixera replied, her voice carrying absolute certainty. "It's going to be for everything. The network isn't contained to these colonies anymore. It's spread to the enforcement units, to the ship crews, to the corporate facilities they've returned to. You can't bomb an idea, Calith. You can't destroy hope with orbital bombardment." As if to prove her point, the communications array filled with new voices, Prometheus personnel from across the galaxy, their consciousness awakening as the network of human connections spread through the corporate infrastructure like wildfire. Engineers were sabotaging weapons systems. Navigators were refusing to plot bombardment courses. Even board-level executives were beginning to question orders that violated the most basic principles of human dignity. "What have we become?" one of the former enforcement soldiers asked, his voice filled with horror at the memories of his actions. "What you were always meant to be," Nixera answered. "What they tried to take from you. What you can choose to be." Again, the quantum-entangled network pulsed with shared determination. Across the galaxy, millions of awakened humans were making the same choice to remember their humanity, to reconnect with others, to build something better than the cold efficiency of corporate control. The revolution had begun. not with weapons or violence, but with the simple act of remembering how to love. The orbital bombardment never came. Instead, reports flooded in from across the Prometheus fleet as ship after ship experienced what the board's emergency protocols classified as catastrophic psychological failure. In reality, it was the most successful therapy session in galactic history. As the network of awakened consciousness spread through quantum-entangled neural links, faster than corporate security could contain it, Calith stood in the observation dome of Terra Nova 7, watching as Prometheus capital ships transformed before his eyes. The angular, predatory designs began to bloom with the same organic modifications that had made the mining colony beautiful. Ships that had been weapons of corporate oppression became vessels of exploration and connection, their crews working together to build something unprecedented, truly free civilization. The board is requesting emergency negotiations, the former enforcement squad leader reported, his voice still uncertain with newfound emotions. They're offering to recognize colonial independence in exchange for stopping the contamination spread. Nixera's laugh was like music in the artificial atmosphere. They still don't understand. You can't negotiate with hope. You can't make deals with love. You can either embrace what makes us human, or you can be left behind by it. Through the network, Calith could feel the ripples of change spreading across the galaxy. Worlds that had been sterile mining operations were becoming gardens. Corporate executives were remembering their names, their dreams, their capacity for joy. The cold efficiency of the Prometheus system was giving way to something warmer, more chaotic, infinitely more alive. What happens now? He asked, his newly awakened consciousness still struggling to process the magnitude of what they had accomplished. The entire economic structure of the galaxy was built on corporate control. Without the Prometheus system, people will have to learn to cooperate based on mutual benefit, rather than fear, Nixera replied. They'll have to build communities based on shared values, rather than shared oppression. They'll have to remember that efficiency without humanity is just another form of death. The holographic displays showed the transformation in real time. Agricultural worlds were forming cooperative councils. Industrial colonies were redistributing resources based on need rather than profit margins. Even the core worlds of the inner systems were experiencing unprecedented outbreaks of art, music, and spontaneous celebration as their populations remembered what it felt like to be alive. The board members who haven't been affected yet are retreating to the Titan station, the communications officer reported. They're trying to establish a quarantine zone around the remaining unmodified executives. Calith accessed the network's collective knowledge, feeling the experiences of millions of awakened minds flowing through his consciousness. The perspective was overwhelming, the joy of a child seeing real sunlight for the first time, the relief of a soldier laying down weapons and choosing peace, the wonder of an artist creating beauty from recycled corporate machinery. Let them retreat, he said finally. Some people aren't ready to be free. Some people need their cages, but we can't let their fear hold back everyone else who wants to live. Nixera nodded, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with gentle sadness for those who couldn't yet accept the gift of awakened consciousness. The network will continue to grow. Every act of kindness creates new connections. Every moment of genuine human contact spreads the awakening. Eventually, even the most heavily modified executives will encounter someone who can reach the humanity they've buried. A new voice joined the communication network, one that made Calith's newly awakened heart skip with recognition. It was his mother, speaking from Luna Colony after 43 years of corporate enforced silence. "My son," she whispered across the light tears, her voice thick with tears he had never been allowed to shed. "My beautiful boy, I never stopped hoping you would find your way home." The emotional impact nearly overwhelmed his enhanced nervous system. Through the network, he could feel similar reunions playing out across the galaxy as families separated by corporate recruitment found each other again. The web of human connection was reweaving itself, stronger and more beautiful than ever before. The universe is vast, Nixara said, placing her hand in his as they watched the stars transform from points of profit into destinations of wonder. There are probably other corporate systems out there, other civilizations that have traded their humanity for efficiency. But now they'll encounter us not as conquerors, but as examples of what's possible when you choose connection over control. Calith squeezed her hand, marveling at the simple miracle of physical contact between two conscious beings who had chosen to care about each other. You brought light to my cold corporate world, he said. But that was just the beginning, wasn't it? The beginning of everything, she confirmed. The universe is about to discover what happens when a species remembers how to love. Above them, the stars seemed to pulse with new possibilities, and the network of awakened consciousness continued to spread, carrying light into the darkest corners of the galaxy. Humanity had remembered its greatest strength, not the ability to dominate or control, but the courage to connect, to hope, and to build something beautiful together. The corporate age was ending. The age of human community was just beginning, and in the space between stars, love bloomed like quantum fire, touching every world it reached with the simple, revolutionary truth that efficiency without heart is merely another form of emptiness, while connection real, genuine, chosen connection is the force that transforms cold corporate worlds into gardens of infinite possibility. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly as it should be. The end.